Okay guys, welcome to another video on my channel. Now today I wanted to cover some of the basics related to machine learning, more inclined towards just the basic definitions and also the general interview questions that get asked when we are trying to appear for any of the machine learning related roles. So that's based on my experience. So let's get into it. Okay. So the first and the very elementary question is, what is machine learning? Now what I have observed is we can get into too much of detail and complex definition for this, but I would, based on my experience, what I've seen is it's better to keep it really simple. So this is the definition that I always try to quote. Basically, machine learning is a field of study that gives machines the ability to learn without being explicitly programmed. Fair and simple. Then there's another one which is simple, which basically states that the science and art of programming computers so that they can learn from data. That's also machine learning. Okay. Then the next obvious question is, why do you use machine learning? If you just want to get deep into like what is the context and what's the purpose of machine learning overall, and just get a theoretical understanding of it. So any problem wherein the solutions that exist if we do not go into machine learning require a lot of hand tuning and long list of and it also has long list of rules that are not constant, then machine learning is a really great basically they're really great use case for machine learning. One example is the trivial example for this is the email spam, where there are multiple rules and complex or ever-changing rules related to spam, because it's not necessary that whatever spam email structure we have today may remain the same eventually. So that's a good example. Now there could be other scenarios as well, like there are some problems where trivially there have been no solution that ever had existed. I don't have any specific example in this case, but yeah, there could be some problems where the mathematical computation and the complexity of the solution is too much to be handled with the conventional programming, and that's where machine learning can help. Now there could be another scenario where we have an environment where the data is like fluctuating and ever changing. For example, stock market pricing. So that's where they are a really good use case for machine learning. Again, another area where machine learning can be applied is not necessarily to get a solution of the problem, but to get a little bit of insight on the problem, as in just to get an understanding of the data. It's more like exploring the data and doing some exploratory analysis on the data. That's where machine learning is really useful. Okay. Now what are the different types of machine learning, or the categorizations we have in machine learning? Now there are multiple categories. When based on my experience, I have seen there are too many definitions, too many categorizations available, and it sometimes gets confusing and difficult to understand how to categorize machine learning. So overall, what I've identified is there are three ways we can categorize. The first and the most common way is the way basically the requirement for the algorithm or the machine learning code or machine learning application to be supervised by a human being. If it needs a supervision, it falls under supervised category. If it does not need any supervision, then it falls under unsupervised category. It's more like supervised is like learning with a teacher, wherein the teacher will tell you the problem as well as a solution for some of the sample cases, and then based on what we have observed or learned from that those examples, we need to predict for new cases where the outcome or the answer is not available. So unsupervised is exactly opposite, where we learn without the teacher. It's more like we observe the data and try to identify the class, or rather it's the machine which observes the data and identifies the class or the category in which the data needs to be divided. Now there are some scenarios where we also have a kind of semi-supervised approach, where it's not completely supervised as well as it's not unsupervised. I think there will be one example that I'll be getting into detail eventually in the slides. And the final thing is the reinforcement kind of learning, where the system basically takes a particular step and adapts based on the response that is received. So it's like at random, when the system starts at a particular point and then takes some decision and then waits for a feedback on that decision. If the feedback is positive, it reinforces, or basically it it could add that particular step as a part to a eventual policy that will be established for that particular step. And otherwise, if the response is negative, then then also it learns that this particular step may not be the correct step to be taken. Again, it will be more clear with some of the examples which I'll try to cover in the slide later on. Okay, then the second type of categorization is on the basis of whether the machine learning algorithm can learn incrementally on the fly or not. So there are two types of algorithms. One is online learning, which basically has the capability to learn on basically learn with the incremental data on in a real-time scenario, or as the name says, learn online. So what happens in these kind of models is, as and when new data comes in, the model can use that new data, club it with the existing previous data, and then relearn at on almost a real time or near real time scenario. This is really useful. Again, one example would be in stock market pricing, where the prices can fluctuate and change really quite often. So it makes sense to have a model which can quickly adapt to the new incoming data and relearn, and then apply the knowledge and update itself and start predicting based on the new information every kind of in a very consistent and quick way. The other categorization in this particular scenario is batch learning, where the model cannot learn real time, but it can learn in form of a batch learning, or in kind of an offline process, where the historical data is clubbed with the new data in a single batch, and then it gets processed again. So it's more like we store the old data as well as we keep on storing the new data until at a particular point we use both the data sets again and retrain the model during an offline or during an off hour window, or during the time when the model is not making any predictions, and then this updated model is again redeployed to production to start predicting. So that's the batch mode of learning. Now there could be another categorization based on the decision boundary or the detailed patterns that the model learns. It's like instance based and model based. So instance based models are those which do not spend a lot of time in processing the data during the time of training. So they are sometimes also called lazy learners, because what they do is they simply store the data, and as and when there is a requirement to make predictions to a new unseen data, or as a new test scenario is identified, it's at that point of time they compare that test scenario with the existing data and try to identify the class, or try to identify the solution. So the thing here is the initial training, or basically the initial phase does not involve excessive calculations, so that way the model is efficient, but the comparison or the actual prediction part takes a lot of time, because all the entire calculation comparison happens at that point of time. The other category here is model based, which is more a conventional algorithm, wherein the model or the algorithm learns based on the historical or the training data that is fed to the model, and then identifies a specific set of hyperparameters or coefficients that it can use to make predictions to the new data coming in. So the initial training part and the initial model building part is like extensive, and it takes time. But the advantage with this is the prediction part does not take time, and it's very quick. So these are the different types of categorizations. Now getting in depth into like supervised learning, as I mentioned, like it's more like learning with a teacher kind of a scenario, where we already the training data that we get, it has some part of the data already labeled, like it's shown in this figure, and some of the data is not labeled. almost the entire training set has the training, as far as the training data is concerned, everything is labeled, and it gives us the classification, like which one is the true classified data and which one is the false classified data, for example in a binary classification scenario. So any new instance that comes in which does not has a label, the model based on its learning from the training set is supposed or expected to make predictions for this new data. Now, some of the examples of the various algorithms that come under supervised learning is the k-nearest neighbor, linear regression, logistic regression, support vector machines, decision trees and random forest, and neural networks. Okay, the next categorization is unsupervised learning. So unsupervised is like learning without a teacher, or learning or clustering the data in which is unlabeled. So in this case, the training set does have the data, but it's not labeled, so we don't know the actual classes or the categories by ourselves. So the model needs to learn and observe the patterns and divide the data into different classes. Now, examples of unsupervised learning involve clustering, more specifically k-means clustering, dbSCAN, and HCA. It can also involve visualization and dimensionality reduction related algorithms like PCA, principal component analysis, and some others. Another example could be anomaly detection based algorithms, one class SVM, isolation forest, etc., and then association rule based learning as well. Now, coming to semi-supervised learning, so as I was mentioning initially, that it's more like a combination of supervised and unsupervised learning. Now, if we see the figure here, what's happening here is we do have some data which has some of the sample points already classified. Let's say here these 3 samples are already classified as triangles, whereas in the other set these 4 are already classified as squares. So for any new data point that is coming in, we have to basically it's going to be a combination. Typically if we are talking about this data point here in this example, we can, it can be a use case for k-nearest neighbor, where we can identify the nearest neighbors and try to identify the class. But here because it's not all the data in a particular class is labeled with the precise class name, so we'll have to take an approach which is slightly different to identify. Now, one actual practical example of this is like the photo hosting services, wherein what we do is, if let's say we have photographs of a particular set of people, let's say a group of 4 to 5 people, so for some of the photographs we may give some labeled information, like already pointing out to a particular set of person that the photo contains person A, B and C, and then we expect that for any new photos or other unlabeled photos, the algorithm will be able to relate and categorize them based on the kind of labeled data that we provided to the algorithm. So it's like not entire training set is labeled, but based on the clues or kind of the labeled data that we have provided for a particular example, the algorithm should be able to handle and kind of label the other set of training data. Another example is like deep belief networks, so DBNs. These involve like stacking of multiple restricted Boltzmann machine algorithms on top of one another. Maybe we can get into the details of this later on in some other video. Okay, then reinforcement learning, like the name indicates, it's basically a kind of learning based on the feedback that the algorithm receives for a particular step it takes. Now it's much better to see this diagram here. Let me close the video. Okay, yeah, so if you see the video, if you see the diagram here, here we can see that the machine or the robot agent, which indicates the actual algorithm in our case, it took a particular step moving closer to a fire, and then based on the feedback that it received, it added this information or it was given a particular score, which is a negative score, and which indicated that the decision it took was a bad decision, and the next time the model is going to avoid taking this particular step and moving towards the fire. So I think this pretty much explains in a very kind of elementary way how reinforcement learning works. Okay, yeah, the other examples similar to this could be the AI based chess and other games like Go that work on the reinforcement learning system. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. Yeah, so now the second set of categorization, that is batch and online learning. So like I was mentioning, batch is caters to a scenario where the system is not it's basically not capable of learning incrementally. It must be trained on both the available data and that is old and the new data every time in form of a batch job or kind of an offline activity. So this is a time and resource consuming process, and it also has a downtime because like I mentioned, it needs the model to be I mean, basically it can only happen during the off hours where we have to combine the old and the new data and retrain the model. Until the retrained model is further again deployed to production, the model still keeps on using the old definitions. Okay, so the other disadvantage, another very important disadvantage with the batch learning is like, if let's say the system that we are trying to, if let's say the system on which the model executes, it's a kind of system which has constraints related to carrying the data. For example, if it's a if let's say it's a mobile application with a machine learning model built into it, then it becomes a challenge for the application to carry the old as well as the old data alongside the new data that is coming in, and then keep on processing that data to build the new model again on relatively inefficient hardware that would be available on a mobile system, compared to what we can do with a hosted application or a server that has much more much beefier configuration to build the model and run the model. So that's about batch learning. Now second categorization is the online learning phase, where the system is trained incrementally. Now without getting into the textual information which I already covered earlier, let's see this diagram, and if you see here, what it indicates is once the so as a typical machine learning model, obviously the first step is the very initial phase is to use the historical data, train the algorithm, and then deploy that algorithm, and it keeps on running. But as and when new data comes in on the fly, the algorithm accepts this new data, run and relearns, and then gets deployed again in production. So the advantage is we do not need to kind of make the model go offline and then execute. So there are certain set of certain specific kind of algorithms only that support online learning. Maybe we can cover that up in some of our future discussions. Okay, then instance based learning, like I already mentioned, so I won't take much time on this one here. So instance based learning will be like I mentioned, the model or the data that gets initially stored as the training set, there is no extensive processing happening on the data. It's just simply stored, and for any new instance that comes in, that's when the actual comparison happens. Like if we talk about KNN, which is a very typical example of instance based learning, so what it does is it simply stores the data or the labels or kind of the data that is provided as the training data by itself without making any calculations, and then for any new instance coming in, it's at that point of time a Euclidean distance or a root mean square RMSE value is calculated, and then the decision is made whether basically how to classify this new instance according to the nearest neighbor or the set of nearest neighbors to that instance. Okay, now the model based learning. So model based learning is as I mentioned, it's a slightly different scenario where the model actually processes the input data, the training data, and then learns some sort of parameters that help the model to classify any new instance that comes in eventually. Now, what are the main challenges with machine learning? Some of the typical challenges that the data scientists face while working with machine learning related projects. The first and the foremost thing is the insufficient quantity of training data. Then there could be non-representative training data, poor quality of data, irrelevant features, and overfitting or underfitting of the training data. Now I'll be covering all these in a fair bit of detail eventually. That's why I'm not getting into the details here. So when we talk about insufficient quantity of training data, what that means is if we do not have enough of quality data for a machine learning algorithm to work, then we may not get the results, or the model obviously as expected will not behave in the right manner. However, there is one more catch to it. Generally speaking, we believe that if we have limited set of data, maybe using a robust algorithm or some sort of complex algorithm can help us overcome that challenge and give us results. But based on the analysis, based on some of the analysis and research that has been done in this field, it does not seem that that's true. If you see the figure here, what it indicates is, if it's just one example where the x-axis indicates the volume of the training data, and then the y-axis indicates the testing accuracy of the models. So if we see that if the volume of data or the test data is very limited, as expected, the basic algorithms like the memory based and the winnowing kind of algorithms, they do not perform that well. Like if you see, the winnowing algorithm has the least accuracy with lower volume of data. However, if we have enough data, eventually we can see that it does not make much difference whether we are using a winnowing based algorithm or a really complex perceptron or naive Bayes based algorithm. So the point is, if we have enough quality data, then irrespective of, or even if our algorithm or the predictor is a weak learner or it's not a very complex algorithm, still it can help us give a really nice prediction. Okay, second issue or second type of problem that we can face is the data being non-representative. What that means is it is very important for any of the algorithm to get a set of training data which represents the class distribution, which represents the different categories of the data which the algorithm is expected to see eventually when a new data comes in. If I try to explain that quickly through an example, if you see here all these orange dots that we see, this is the set of training data that was initially provided to this model, based on which this dotted yellow line was identified as a linear regression representative of the model. So the expectation was, based on this linear regression line, the model will be able to predict for any of the new incoming points as the values, or at least it would predict it to a fair bit of accuracy. But with the new data coming in, or with out of sample data, it was observed that the data points were far off, or there were additional data points which were far off from the actual training data set, or they were like behaving like outliers for this trained model, which is not actually correct, because a lot of significant amount of points were lying in this particular area. I mean, although this is just a representation, the point or the crux of the thing, crux of the matter is basically the training set did not had all the classifications or all the set of expected data available, and that's why this white line, which is the correct prediction or the correct linear regression model for this data set, was not deduced, and it caused a very kind of a weak learner or a very inefficient algorithm to be identified as the solution. So that is just a representation of the the problem that we face with non-representative training data. Okay, now the next thing is the poor quality training data, which is quite obvious. If our data has errors, if it has missing values, it has outliers, or it has a lot of noise and inconsistent information, then obviously the model will not be able to behave and get an efficient solution out of it. It's like garbage in gets you garbage out. So that's as simple as that. So it's very important, and it's imperative for the data scientist or anybody dealing with machine learning related algorithms to spend a lot of time just with the cleaning and cleansing of the data. So that's a very important step, and from what I have observed, and generally speaking, almost 80% of the time with any machine learning problem goes into the cleaning and cleansing of the data itself. Now, The next thing is if our model is fed with irrelevant features or features which are not really strong predictors. So it is very important to have features which are really correlated to the problem we are trying to solve, and also they are correlated to the response or the expected output that we are trying to achieve. Okay, so there is a concept called feature engineering which takes care of eliminating issues related to feature being irrelevant or features being weak. It has multiple steps like feature selection, wherein there are techniques to select the most useful features out of a lot. The one of the ways to do that is to basically identify correlation between the different features within themselves, as well as with respect to the response when we are trying to deal with the training data. The other step is feature extraction, where the different features or the different identified features are grouped into a more relevant feature, and it's like combining multiple weak features, if I can say it that way, into a feature which is more kind of stronger and has a much better correlation when it comes to the response or the output of the model. So that's feature extraction. Then the third thing is creating more features, either creating new features based on re-engineering the data or re-observing the data, or gathering more data itself, which is again high quality and more relevant. So these are few of the steps that need to be followed so that we make sure that the features that we are using are really high quality. Okay, then the last thing is overfitting or underfitting training data. So overfitting is a scenario where the training data set that is being used, the model is very sensitive to that training. That means if you use a training set A, the model is producing some sort of error A, but if you use training set B, the model produces a totally different error B. So in this case, the model is like overfitting, or it's too sensitive to that training data set, and it indicates that we need to simplify or reduce the complexity of the model. This process of reducing the complexity in general is called regularization. There are different techniques to perform regularization, there are some regularization algorithms like RITS regularization, lasso regularization, and then elastic net regularization. So we can get into those details in some other discussion, wherein I'll try to take up regularization in detail. But the crux is overfitting is when the model is highly biased or kind of highly inclined towards the training data set that's getting used, and the solution is to regularize or reduce the complexity, maybe to even use a more simple model rather than using a complex model. So that's about overfitting. Now underfitting is exactly opposite, as the name suggests, wherein the model is totally indifferent to training. No matter how we train the model, irrespective of what training data set is being used, the model always produces the same set of errors. So that means it's indifferent to the training. Okay, so now this also indicates another issue where the model, either the algorithm is very weak, or the features that are being used are not great, or they are not of high quality. So we need to work on identifying if using a more robust or a complex model helps, or we can even go back and rework on the data and try to identify much better features to get the desired results. Okay, now the final thing, one more thing is related to the testing and validation. Once the model is being built based on the training that we do, the only way to know how well the model generalizes is to basically test the model. Now we can use the test. The most common way is to use a testing data set to test the model, and then retrain and tune the model if there are some discrepancies or the testing results are not that great. The other approach is like we can actually allow the model to get tested once it's productionized, but the disadvantage with that is it may cause issues to the actual application, or in some scenarios it might not even be totally feasible. So that's why we generally follow a training and a testing approach, where the initial training or the initial source data is already split into a training and a testing set in a particular ratio. Typically 80% is taken up as a training data and 20% is taken up as a testing data set. Okay, so yeah, these were some of the areas that I wanted to cover, Again, this is based on my experience with the different kind of interviewing scenarios that I have observed so far, and I believe this might be useful for somebody who is trying to prepare for interviews. And I hope this video will be useful for you. Thank you. Thanks a lot.